Welcome to Module 9, School Funding. My name is John Sample. I am the current superintendent for Merrill Area Public Schools. This is my 32nd year in education and my 13th year as an administrator. I was a special education teacher for many years before becoming a director of special education and pupil services in Merrill, and now this is my 5th year as the superintendent. Regarding school finance, I've experienced a number of milestones, if you will, when it comes to what districts can expect. Anything from a successful referendum to a recent school closure due to declining enrollment. And then just this past week, towards the end of February 2021, we experienced something that I didn't think I would see in my career. We had an elementary charter school that we've been embattled in court cases with regarding their contract and any defaults with their contract. And so recently our board approved the petitioner's need for detachment. And so that was a unanimous decision that should work out well for us economically as a district. And then this elementary school, this charter school, can reattach to the Athens School District where it was many, many years ago. So it's been an exciting tenure thus far as superintendent, and school finance, certainly the knowledge of school finance and understanding school finance has certainly made it very relevant and a great experience for myself. This slideshow will take you through just an overview of the many facets of school finance, and I will provide as many resources as possible. DPI is an excellent resource if you want to dig deeper into any potential areas that we touch on today, and if you have any other questions. Since the mid-1970s, as the slide shows, Wisconsin has distributed state general aid to public school districts through a tax-based three-tiered equalization formula. It's designed to level the playing field, and this equalizes the revenue, thus allowing the opportunity for similar educational programming among all districts. In general, districts with higher property tax base receive less aid from the state. District property value is a key factor. Please click on the two resources to get more information regarding three-tiered equalization formula, as well as the WASBO presentation on equalized aid. This presentation is several years old, but it's still very true to everything that applies today financially. This shows how schools are funded based on property value. The blue area would be the equalized aid given to a school district with less property value. The higher your property value base, the less state aid you receive. If you look all the way to the right and you see that the bar graph is completely red, there are a few districts that receive zero state aid due to their very rich property value in the state of Wisconsin. Please watch or read the resources provided on this slide and follow the think about this directions as well as the question and how the 5 key attributes of state funding apply to your school district. Maintenance of effort is an extremely important topic. I will not read everything on this slide, but I have provided you with an excellent question and answer link from the DPI website regarding maintenance of effort. It is important to note that failure to meet MOE may result in a district actually writing a check back to DPI for state aid. And so maintenance of effort, please make sure you read through each one of the question and answers. It's a very broad topic, but it's also one that's extremely important to all school districts. Transfer of service is an exemption that districts are eligible for. It provides that a school district which assumes responsibility for a program or a service from another governmental unit may request and be granted an exemption based on the two factors below. There's important due dates for the transfer of service, and all of those take place in September, with a Part A, Part B, and Part C due by the end of September. Shared service agreements are a very common practice with Wisconsin school districts, probably the most popular being the shared service agreements that each of us have with our respective CSAs. Districts can also enter into shared service agreements to provide programming and to pool their resources, especially in the area of special education. Regarding facilities and maintenance, there is no Wisconsin law or administrative rule that talks about capacity for classrooms. Those are going to be more with the local, state, or federal building codes or fire codes. There is one, and this is not to be confused with capacity, but our Achievement Gap Reduction, or AGR, does specify, and this is the former SAGE program, the Student Achievement Guarantee and Education Program. Beginning in 17-18 school year, AGR did say that districts for students in kindergarten through third grade will provide one-to-one tutoring by a licensed teacher or instructional coaching for teachers provided by a licensed teacher, or they will maintain 18 students per every one teacher or a 30 student to 2 teacher classroom ratios, and providing professional development on small group instruction. So there's 3 different ways with AGR, so it's not to be confused with classroom capacity or student capacity when it comes to building codes. Ask how much money in your district budget is allocated for facilities and maintenance. The first person that you may want to go to is your Director of Buildings and Grounds. I know a consistent message from our own Director of Buildings and Grounds is it's not enough. We really depend on our operating referendum, and even then, we're just trying to stay ahead of all of the building and maintenance needs that we have in our district. The term title can be a little confusing. Typically, it refers to parts or sections of an amendment or a federal law. However, that can vary from bill to bill. This is just another example of how terms have kind of morphed and have become part of the educational lexicon or the fabric of what we refer to in terms of finance. Title I is probably the most common funding source for school districts in Wisconsin, and the largest part of the Title I program is the Title I Part A. You can read a little bit more information about Title I. One of my pet peeves is that there's no such thing as a Title I teacher. Salaries for teachers can be funded from Title I. So Title I is a funding source. The teacher does not teach title. Usually they teach reading or math. please read the descriptions of both Title I Part A and Title I Part D. Title II funding still has to do with increasing student achievement and closing achievement gaps, but this is primarily by means of professional development opportunities. Title II funding is used to recruit, train, and prepare candidates to become highly qualified teachers in the core academic areas. Title III is another title funding source having to do with our English learner students. Title IV is a flexible block grant that authorizes activities in three broad areas: access to a well-rounded education, improving school conditions for learning to ensure safe and healthy students, and the effective use of technology to improve academic achievement and digital literacy. Title V is also known as the Rural Education Initiative, designed to help meet the unique needs of rural schools. Most of us are familiar with Title IX, no exclusion based on sex. An interesting part about this was that Title IX, the original statute, made no explicit mention of sports. However, it applies now, it seems, to high school and collegiate athletics. I'm old enough to remember having graduated in 1978. My sophomore year in high school was the first year that a girls' track program was established. So my freshman year in Arizona, we only had boys' track. And so because of Title IX and the non-exclusion based on sex, when it applied to sports in this case, my sophomore year was the first year that we had girls' track. Revenue limits and establishing those revenue limits using the DPI formula is obviously a major portion of school finance. In 1993, the legislature took a snapshot of school finance and district spending throughout the state. During that time, our own district, Merrill Area Public Schools, was a very low spending district, and so based on that snapshot, our revenue limit was rather limited. Please be sure to click on the link and read the 4 steps in determining a school district's maximum revenue limit. Carefully read that article, and then, if you have a moment, speak with your school business administrator about your district's revenue limit. The next slide references revenue sources. Please read the Blue Ribbon Commission on School Funding article. What recommendations would benefit your specific school district, and are there any suggestions that you may disagree with in this article? There are 2 other articles here for your reading pleasure. Revenue sources obviously make up another large portion of our school funding, and so each one of these 3 resources should provide you with additional information. The Wisconsin Uniform Financial Accounting Requirements, often referred to as WUFAR, provide a uniform financial and accounting structure for public school districts in Wisconsin. When most people initially look at an account number or some type of a revenue projection or any type of annual budget meeting notes or any preparations for the annual meeting. Account numbers can be a little bit intimidating at first, but just understanding what the WUFAR structure does, it breaks down every single account so that once you're familiar with the WUFAR structure, you can actually step into another district and pretty much be assured that you know primarily what that account number is signifying. It's all broken down by fund, location, the source of revenue or the object of the expense, function, and the program or project. You can see the WUFAR basics here that are linked on this slide, and then you've also got an example of Janesville's budget book, probably used at their annual meeting. The definition of fund is a bit more complicated than I would have ever imagined myself. Please click on the School District of Janesville example of an explanation to the general public about their funding. And in the remaining slides, we will talk about some of the more popular funds: 10, 21, 27, 38, 39, 60, and just a few other sources. The two primary sources of funds are instructional funds and debt service funds. Instructional funds include funds 10, 21, 23, 27, 29, 91, 93, and 99. And typically when we're talking about debt service funds, we're talking about funds 38 and or 39. Fund 10 is the most widely used fund. That's the general fund. Most school districts, their Fund 10 is 70% at least of all district budgeting goes for teacher or employee salary and benefits. And so that is a function of Fund 10. You can read the other things that Fund 10 is used for. Generally, it's day-to-day activities, day-to-day operations. Fund 21, that's a special project fund. Special projects are used to account for a variety of different activities. They can be used to track gifts or donations from private parties. The donor may specify the exact purpose for which the funds shall be used, and that is placed in Fund 21. Fund 27 is the Special Education Fund, and also included on this slide, Fund 38, that's a non-referendum debt service fund. Please take a few moments to read a little bit more about these funding sources. Fund 39 is the referendum approved debt service fund, and Fund 60 is the agency fund that's used to account for assets held by the district per pupil organizations such as bowling clubs, student council, etc., any clubs or activities. Please take a few moments to familiarize yourself with these two funds. Please read about Fund 80, also known as the Fund Fund. Annual meetings are held by school districts after May 15th or before October 31st per statute. In Merrill, our annual meeting is typically the end of September, the first part of October. And what happens at an annual meeting is the setting of the budget, and there's community votes on not only that budget, but also things like school board members' salaries, their payment per meeting, if you're going to increase the cost for student breakfasts or lunch and those types of things. And then you do a review of the year financially, and then you establish your goals for the future as you move forward. I've seen annual meetings that were very well attended. Typically, unless we have something controversial on our agenda, our annual meetings rarely produce anybody from the community. It's usually the administrators that are involved in the process and our board members. But we've been trying to increase our attendance from some years 0 to as many as a dozen. And it seems like unless there's something on there that's of particular interest to our community, at least, that they kind of take it for granted, and there's really not a lot of new information that they have not been exposed to already. At this time, take a look at your own district's annual budget that was furnished at your annual meeting, and it should be within your school board docs or on your website. There's a couple of links here, one to the Sun Prairie annual meeting, and the other is the link to the Green Bay annual meeting pamphlet. Looking at your own or looking at either of these examples, find the most expensive 3 items. Does this align with what your mission and vision is? Does it describe how the budget is communicated without communicating the specific goals and plans for the school district? And what is one question that you may have after you read through the annual meeting information? If you have time to meet with your school business administrator, the annual meeting and some of the summaries of the previous year's budget always make for a good conversation, especially as you are establishing your new goals for the following year. How to incorporate state and federal grants. The federal and state grant program area of DPI administers the financial management and accounting of federal and state grants to all school districts. What percentage of your district's budget comes from state and federal grants? Also, it's very important to be strategic regarding state and federal grants, since these monies do have a sunset and the timeline is very specific. Please click on the DPI link below, which will take you to 18 or so competitive grants that are listed by inventory. Make a top 5 list of state and federal grants that you may be responsible for and you're able to take advantage of, depending on your area of certification. Understanding school vouchers and charter schools. We'll talk about school vouchers and charter school as defined by DPI. School vouchers include the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program, Racine Parental Choice Program, Wisconsin Parental Choice Program, and then Special Needs Scholarship Program. Essentially what happens is that the resident school district will pay for students through a reduction in its own state general aids for them to attend any participating private schools. In Merrill, we happen to have one parochial school in our area that is participating, and they do receive a portion of our general aid. And you can see more information on this slide regarding school vouchers. Charter schools, they're public, non-sectarian schools created through a business-like contract or a charter between the Charter Governance Board and the sponsoring school district. In our case, the charter school that I referenced earlier is Maple Grove. It was once known as Maple Grove Elementary School. Now it's Maple Grove Charter School. It's the prettiest little red schoolhouse in the country that you'd ever want to see. It had an average enrollment of about 62 students, 64 students, and it serves students K through 5. A couple of years ago, our board, in an effort to potentially close Maple Grove, found defaults with their contract. And some of the key portions of what DPI says is also found in this slide, that the charter school motto is autonomy for accountability. While they did have some autonomy, most of what they were doing aligned with our district's curriculum, and so there was not enough of a unique portion as outlined in their charter contract, and so that's where we found defaults. And in our interactions with the Maple Grove Governance Board, our school board actually became the defendants in a court case, of which the school district lost, but that case has been appealed. And since then, our board last week, this is the last week of February 2021, unanimously approved the petitioner's want to detach to the Athens School District. So lots of very interesting things happening there. It brings into account a lot of what we've talked about so far. Fund 46, which I did not talk about, that's a long-term capital improvement trust fund in which we can transfer monies into that rather than into our own fund balance. And then once that matures at the end of a period of 5 years, we can use Fund 46 assets to any approved long-term capital gain or capital improvement plans, and so anything having to do with the maintenance of our facilities. The other thing that I think will benefit by having that charter school, despite its enrollment of approximately 72 students now, and some of those students are open enrolled, we will not feel the full effects of the loss of any potential students, because what the DPI will do is they've got a running average really of when we're talking about membership and per pupil revenue, it's a running average of 3 years worth of data. And so by the time it does catch up with us, we're hoping to be able to offset some of our costs. It looks like we'll be able to put a surplus of $1 million next year into Fund 46. And then we have a referendum which will be coming up 1 year from this coming April. So lots of moving parts with it, and I know our school business administrator has been working very closely with myself and with others to make sure that we're as tight as we can possibly be as we're looking at some things that really put us in an unprecedented situation financially. Please read the information on this next slide. What I'd like for you to do is to focus on the articles for vouchers and charter schools. So we've got vouchers support and the argument against. We've got charter schools, support for charter schools and the argument against. Read the supporting article first, followed by the argument against article. Create a simple T-chart with pros and cons of vouchers and charter schools. Has your previous stance prior to reading these articles changed, or does it remain the same? I tried not to allow my thoughts on vouchers at least come through as I was providing information in the previous slide, but charter schools, I feel having a charter school in our district has been a very valuable thing. In fact, we've got our other charter school is the Bridges Virtual Academy, and they're doing a fantastic job. Due to COVID and the pandemic and everything related to that, we saw an increase of students into our Bridges Virtual Academy, not only locally but statewide. And so now we're operating with more than 1,000 students. That does become our largest building, so to speak, in the district. And so I don't have any opinions one way or another. Charter schools, I've seen them performing very, very well. Both of our charters have performed well. And but when it comes to vouchers, I do have an opinion regarding that, especially when I see our own financial situation with our local parochial school. So please take your time to read this. Create that simple T-chart with the pros and cons of vouchers and charter schools, and reflect. Does your stance remain the same, or has it changed? Open enrollment allows for parents to apply for their children to attend public schools in a school district other than the one in which they reside. I had mentioned our Bridges Virtual Academy earlier, and our enrollment for that program is well over 1,000 students. Less than 100 of those students actually reside in our area, and so we really depend on open enrollment. Of course, also knowing that the open enrollment transfer amount is much less than if those students had resided in our district, and so we don't get the full member per pupil revenue for that. But think about this as it applies to your own district. How has open enrollment impacted your school or district? That can be positively or negatively. And what strategies would you use as a school or district leader regarding open enrollment? I want to take a few minutes to talk about our charter school detachment from last week, the Maple Grove detachment, because it does really incorporate a lot of considerations that a district needs to think about, especially financially. One thing I can tell you is that there's a scholarship associated with any student that graduates or goes through Maple Grove Elementary and then ends up graduating from Merrill High School with I believe it's a 2.5 GPA. Each year, the From Scholarship donates and has a scholarship fund that will provide students who attended most, if not all, of their grades at Maple Grove and graduate from the high school with a scholarship. And that scholarship amount depends on how many students graduate that year and how many students are eligible each year. So one of the considerations that they will have to take into account is what do they want to do once they detach to Athens. The worst case scenario is we've got 11th graders this year who went all 6 years to Maple Grove back then and will be graduating from Merrill High School next year. And does that mean that they are no longer eligible for that scholarship? And so there's a lot of considerations that the scholarship committee, consisting of a From family member, our high school principal, the governance board president, as well as the town of Hamburg and our charter school principal will have to decide. The other thing is open enrollment. We know that dollar amount per pupil is less revenue than if they had resided in our district. But what that does is we have approximately 46 students who are currently attending our middle school and our high school who live in the area for detachment, in the detached geographical area. And so in order for them to continue as a student in the Merrill Area Public School District, they would have to open enroll. Now when you look at, I'm a little biased of course, but when you look at what we have to offer as a school district compared to Athens, Athens is much smaller. I'm very proud of the Fab Lab and the technical education program that we have at the high school. We also, just because of our size, we offer a lot more opportunity for students. Certainly not knocking the Athens School District at all, but especially if a student is already enrolled in Merrill High School. So they can certainly open and enroll back to our district, but unfortunately we would not be able to provide them with transportation. They would have to transport themselves unless there was a substantial agreement between the two districts for transportation. So you've got the K-5 students who I think most of them will probably stay put. They will probably stay at Maple Grove as a part of Athens, but then you've got our 6-12 secondary students who a large portion of those have already indicated through a survey that their parents would open and enroll them so that they can stay in our district. Talked a little bit about Fund 46 earlier, and Fund 46 is that account to where it's a long-term capital improvement trust fund. Money is deposited into there. It must stay put for 5 years. And then after that 5-year waiting period is over, they may be used for the purposes of long-term capital improvement plan projects. So that's one of the things. We started a Fund 46, a substantial amount in our Fund 46 account about 4 years ago. And so the timing, I think, is really going to be good for us. Like I say, with the consolidation of the rest of our district, and that's closing one of our elementaries, having the 2 remaining in-town elementaries, one be a K2, the other one be grades 3 through 4, and moving our 5th grade up to our middle school so that they have grades 5 through 8, and then our high school remaining as 9 through 12. Just in those savings alone, we're going to be able to see a surplus of approximately $1 million that we will put into Fund 46. Now, when the 3-year average catches up to us with our declining enrollment and any potential students that we could lose from the Maple Grove Charter School detachment, we'll have to be prepared for that. And so we'll have to be very thoughtful when we go back to our community to talk about referendum and operational dollar amounts that our community would be able to support. We talk about assets and liability when we talk about detachment too. And so, as if it wasn't confusing enough, there are 3 parcels of land that Maple Grove Charter School kind of sits on. There's the one parcel where it's just the building itself. There's another parcel right next door, right there, that is a very small school forest. And then there's a parcel immediately directly across the road which has the septic, of course. And so when you talk about assets and liabilities, it depends on who you talk to. If you want to take Maple Grove is approximately 4.11% of our total district assets. And so if you want to take it from that amount, it would be a substantial dollar amount that we could be looking to transfer to the Athens School District. But we've also had an offer for the building, and we've also heard things from their school board that it sounds like this deal will be a lot simpler, as simple as we can be, because school does start in next September, whether we like it or not. And so we have to look at, what are we going to do with the belongings. We contract out with a food service, Taher Food Service, so some of that kitchen equipment will have to come out because that belongs to them. Of course, our technology and our door fobs and our keypads and those types of things we would try to retain for ourselves. Any curricular materials that we're currently using as well. So there's just a lot to consider. And then when you talk about all of that, that's all the nitty-gritty financial part of things. It's maintaining the culture too. We don't want a divided community. We don't want to pit neighbors against neighbors. I think with the petition, that has already done a certain amount of damage, because there are those who felt very strongly of not signing the petition to detach, and then the others who felt very strongly about that building and the history of that building and keeping that in in their area as long as they possibly can. Um, so there is some tension already in this very small community of Hamburg. And then we also make sure that we need to maintain our relationships with those families, because while they may be Athens students for their kindergarten through fifth grade schooling, their educational career, we might just see them, a majority of them, come over to our middle school and our high school and open and roll back into the district, transporting themselves, of course. But so the relationship, just because they may be Athens for a few years, doesn't mean that they may not return to Merrill, which would be good for all of us. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. That was one good example of something that really incorporates a lot of different financial aspects and a lot of different things that have to be considered. So thank you very much for your time. You have now reached the end of this module. If you have any questions at all, please contact your instructor via private discussion, which is preferred, or by email. Thank you very much.